Today's talk is about using Revit to do animation, which I'm not expecting you to do for this course, but I want you to know how to do it if you ever need to for some future need. And the broader picture is Keith is asking you to consider sequences of proceeding through space. And what that approach has in common with animation is ways to think about that, ways to present it, ways to make it clear to whoever is seeing what you're producing that this is a progression, not just a couple of random images. And, if you could present them in time, well, I remember, let's say 20 years ago, we do renderings, not as good as what we have now, but renderings, and have 6 of them on foam core stacked up on an easel, and then show one at a time to the client or whoever. And the problem with that is it's hard for the viewers to keep the previous ones in mind as they're seeing what's there visible to them then. And that's sort of the problem with animation. Unless you rewind or something, which isn't always in the control of the viewer, you don't have the chance to sort of reground yourself of where you're coming from. So sort of however you go about this, and let's say you're printing stills for Keith, doing one from the lobby looking down the hall, and you sort of pick up hall and you pick up the walls and you pick up the floor, establishing the elements that will be continued in the next frame, so that in the viewer's mind and eye, there's an overlap of images as you go down. And whether that's in terms of materials, or I would think of them as landmarks, a big chandelier or a statue or a tree or something or other, to be able to understand that progression through space as you get from one place to another. And just in terms of laying them out physically on a sheet or on a board or on a wall. In the West, we tend to read left to right and top to bottom. So one of these might work out on a layout sheet, a horizontal or vertical. But there are any number of ways you could lay out a sequence of images, like these staggered ones, which might change in size. They might start a little smaller and get slightly bigger if there's a clear-cut destination to the progression. So don't think you just have to line up straight across the page. But anyway, we're dealing with a sequence of images. When I've done these stills in PowerPoint, I really enjoyed just using the crossfade to get from one image to the next. It's sort of like moving from one place to the next, as opposed to just quick change. That way you can see them both at once, I guess is what it boils down to. So with that background for thinking about sequences of images, let's look at how Revit generates animated walkthrough sequences. I want to show you what its abilities are and what its limitations are. Let me just show you what's involved, in this case, with walking down the hall, creating an animation that would walk us down the hall. These always start in a plan view. So in a plan view, to create a walkthrough, I'm going to just sort of come out of the elevators, walk down the hall, and end up looking at the niche. It's, not very exciting, but there it is. And this is a view, 3D view, walkthrough. And what we're going to do is just position just a couple of camera locations down the hall. And these are called keyframes. And they're the ones that will actually describe the path. And then Revit will sort of fill in all the intermediate frames between them, a process known as tweening. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to start here, going to walk over towards this wall, make a long swoop like this, and end up looking at the niche like that. When I've done those points, that looks like a pretty good path for me. I'll go to finish walkthrough. Not hit enter. You don't hit enter at that point. You hit finish walkthrough. Otherwise, you have to start all over again. That's really all we have to do. You'll notice that over here on the project browser, that has created this walkthrough group and has created walkthrough number 1, which when I go to it, this is a view. And you can see this little arch right here. It's opened up at the very last keyframe that I created, which was sort of a close-up of the niche. So if we need to start manipulating this, we select the view, go to Edit Walkthrough. And the instructions here are really pretty good if you need to do that. Go to Edit Walkthrough. And then we can step back. Up here, we can walk through it with previous frame, which just takes me back one tweened frame at a time, back towards the previous keyframe. Or I can hit previous keyframe and go back to those 4 camera locations that I created. Once you've gotten back to the beginning, that'll gray out. You can't do that anymore. And then just to play it, we can just see what this looks like in however many frames per second it can put up. So a quick little preview of the eventual smoother animation. all there is to it. I think I'll just work right down through these pages as far as we get, just so we don't leave anything out. And I have to confess, I do this rarely enough that I use this exact same PDF to get me through things. So it looks great, but that's in hidden line mode. Let's see what it looks like in realistic mode. So this is realistic mode applied to the walkthrough as opposed to one of the static 3D views. And then I can hit play. It takes longer. Each frame is a little jerkier. It's just taking Revit that much longer to sort of color each frame, move on to the next, color each frame, move on to the next, color each frame, move on to the next. And something you can see here is right now we're seeing those edges, which is not the way reality looks. So the next pass will be to turn those off. There's that. So I think if we go back to realistic, we can, in graphic display option, we can turn the edges off. And I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to check this smooth lines with anti-aliasing, and that'll make these sort of jagged lines smooth out a little more evenly when two colors come together and don't line up with the pixels themselves. Apply. Okay, so let's try this again. Got to pick it, edit the walkthrough, play. This looks pretty good. How long does it take you guys to render a frame of the hall here? Let's say a minute, okay? This was 300 frames, 20 seconds times 15 frames a second. If we click this over into render animation, which we can do once we get to the export part of this program, then that would take 300 minutes divided by 60 is 5 hours. And when I used to have to do this for work, I just try to time it out. So I'd start doing this at 9 o'clock and then go home, get some sleep and come back in the morning and it would be done. So there's that. Now, if we want to save this as a standalone file, what this boils down to is Revit will generate each frame, save it to disk, generate the next frame, save it to disk next to the other one. I mean, they're all together in one file called an AVI file, which is just a strung together sequence of individual frames. And we have this walkthrough, active. We go to File, Export, and they have to scroll down here to Images and Animations and pick Walkthrough. We're going to leave this whole thing being 15 frames a second, which is a little jerky, but we'll leave it there for now. We won't change anything. 20 seconds to get from one end to the other. And then visual style, we can pick realistic, which is what we have now, or realistic with edges. I'm going to leave it just as realistic. But note that we can also do rendering if we want. And that's the one that's going to multiply your time by 100 or something. But so we'll just stick with realistic. And we'll keep the same size for now, whatever that is. Okay. And it's going to want to actually write this to a file. Right now, I'm just going to stick this in my desktop and call it realistic walk through. I find naming them really helps compared to just the one that has the name of the Revit file and the date and the time or whatever. I want to keep those separate and be able to tell what they are on my desktop. Save. And then we have the option here to compress a file, which will make the net, the size of it maybe be a quarter or a half as big at some sacrifice of image quality. So I think right now we will just do uncompressed and explore the other options later on. Say uncompressed, okay. So generates an image, saves an image, generates an image, saves an image, all the way down to the end of the hallway. This is a bit slower than just using play because each frame image needs to be written to disk before generating the next one. And one thing we could do once we look at this and play it back at 15 frames a second and realize that's really too jerky. We can like add And right now it's like 300 frames. We can say double the number of frames and do it at 24 frames a second, which won't affect actually how fast it generates, but will affect how fast it plays back. So play back a lot more smoothly than at 15. Oh, and if you have lights like the long tubular ones that require the high quality rendering option, that's going to really, really slow things down because that takes maybe 4 times as long as medium does. Okay, we're getting there. This wasn't too bad. Couple minutes. Okay, so that's saved now to the desktop, and that's here. That's the realistic walkthrough, which double clicking should just open it in whatever your current video player is. So you see, we get some fairly noticeable jitter as caused by things just being in different. Well, caused by two things. Let me stop it. Stop it for once. One is things just do have jagged edges because we didn't do this as a high resolution output. This is like 400 by 500, and full screen, nice and smooth would be 1900 by 1000 or something or other. So bigger, taking longer per frame. So it's a result not only of the resolution, but also of the fact that we're moving fast enough that, let's just say, this door is going to move, let's say from here to here between one frame and the next frame. So we're just going to get it moving in little jerks instead of as a smooth look. One more time. So with this visual style and image resolution, this took 100 seconds to generate a 20-second output. Yeah, all the little pixel dancing is distracting. But it gives you a sense of the place, a sense of the space. Now I'm going to give rendered output a try, or at least start to do it rendered. I don't expect you guys to see what the difference will be. For this walkthrough, I'm going to turn on my interior artificial only. I'll go to medium. Okay, file, export, scroll down, image, walkthrough. I'm going to change this to rendering, and it'll use whatever these rendering settings I just did. I'll keep the size the same, just to not to change too many things at one time. And say okay. And I'll just say desktop rendered walkthrough. This will just be a brief test. Save. And again, I'll say uncompressed just to see where we get. So you can see up here on the screen, it's rendering each of these frames. And each one's taking 7 or 8 seconds, something like that. I thought I had my artificial lights on. So I'm just going to stop this. Yes. Close. Rendering settings. They're all on. There's always something like this when I'm doing demonstrations. Interior artificial only. Well, I don't know why I wasn't getting the materials and things at that point, or the lighting. Let's just try rendering right now, as if it's a still image. That's what I was expecting to get for each of those frames. For interest's sake, while we're here, this was just on the medium quality setting for rendering. And these long lights, if you do that, it takes the shortcut and just renders with a single point source instead of the full length of it, which needs high over there. Maybe it rendered the animation correctly to disk, but didn't re-render it to the screen. So I'll take a quick look at that rendered walkthrough. Okay, so to clarify that, it is rendering the output. It's not rendering here on the screen, which I guess would just take it twice as long, saving time, just one less thing it has to do. Okay, so that's only a couple of frames, but that's good to know. So anyway, so you can see what's going to be happening here. Kill that. Drag this back over. File, export. Oh, I see. It seems to default back to realistic each time. And I'll just keep it at this same, everything else the same. Well, that's a new behavior since I last used animation in Revit. Also, while we're waiting for this, Revit 2027 has come out. Every April, they release the next year's. The word seems to be, don't bother. They've added AI. It will be interesting to see at some point what that can do for us, but I think we give it a year or something to figure it out. So as you're renewing, you can still keep renewing for the 2026 version. Oh, this is too tedious. It doesn't even tell us what frame we're on. Something Autodesk is making a big effort towards is being able to have a whole huge project with multiple firms and multiple people working on it at the same time, all in the cloud and all connected and all being able to communicate with each other. And the whole thing is called Forma. They renamed a lot of their services to Forma. Forma this and Forma that. It was complex before, and I think it's even more complex now. And I hope you never have to deal with it in your professional careers, because I don't intend to. Well, I think I've done enough of this one. I'm just going to stop it and play a little short piece of. Yes, stop this. If you notice, all that rendering time only produced 1 second's worth of animation. You can see down at the bottom right-hand corner. It's really pretty nice. I mean, I don't know that you guys will have video presentations to do, but we did one year over in the BAB on a huge screen, and these can be inserted into a PowerPoint presentation and clicked on, and then they'll run there on the screen. So there's that. Let's see what else we can do. If we want that to be smoother, less jerky, I'm going to make it still 30 seconds long, but at 24 frames a second instead of 15. So we pick this guy, edit walkthrough, and then something we can do here is set the number of frames that we want to have. Right now we have like 4 camera points with those 300 frames divided up somehow between them, pretty much evenly along that path. But if I want to make this be, let's say 720 and 24 frames a second, will give us a slower walk down the hall, taking 30 seconds instead of 20, and less jerkiness between frames. Increasing the frames and increasing the frames per second, applying that. And you'll see at that point, then our time jumps back up to 30 seconds. 24 times 30 is 720. So now I've changed that definition to be 720 frames. If I go to File, Export, Walkthrough, I'll just do it realistic for right now. Just keep the whole process to a reasonable length of time. I'm also going to make it bigger at this point. And on page 4, I think, page 5, I've given the sizes for larger images so we don't see all the pixels. And I'm going to change this up to I'll do 1280 by 720. which is standard 720p resolution. Okay. And I'm going to call this realistic walkthrough. Smooth, 24 frames per second. Save. Okay. So we can see that the movements are much smaller, which is going to result in a smoother looking image when we start to see it. This file format, AVI, doesn't allow any sort of smoothing between frames to make those even more fluid. This classroom is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 times 24. Let's say it's 25 feet wide. Anybody have a stopwatch on their phone? I want you to time how long it takes me just to move nicely through the space. I'm looking all around me. I'm looking to the right. I'm looking to the left. I'm to the wall. 8.5 seconds. Thank you. Okay, let's call that 9. And let's call, if that was actually 27 feet and it was 9 seconds, it would be 3 feet per second, just as a nice round number. I could have walked a little faster, I guess. Anyway, so the point is, as we're walking down this hall or something, we don't want the camera to race through a human scaled space, and we don't want it to drag either. So one of the controls in there when we're setting things will tell us how many feet per second that is along the path. So shoot for 3. 2.5 to 3.5 should be fine. And something I say here on page 5 is the sad fact that a higher resolution or smoother animation will always take more time to generate. Looking better means more frames per second, which takes longer. Looking better means larger images, which means more pixels, which means it takes longer. And the only way you can get around that is with using a program like Enscape, but the hardware for that costs extra money and the software costs money. So as usual in America, if you pay money, you can skip to the head of the line. So what I want to look at next, once we look at this, is to be able to go down the hall and look up at the ceiling halfway down and then come back down. I really should have something down here to arrive at, as opposed to just the blank wall behind another blank wall. So this was realistic 24 frames a second. So you can see it's bigger, it's cleaner, the jaggies aren't so bad, and it's a smoother pass from one frame to the next. So if you had stuff going on these walls and we're narrating this as it was being shown during a presentation or something, I think that would be a pretty acceptable way to do that. Okay, if we get into my first floor plan view, I want to bring back that walkthrough. In plan view, I go back and select it, or right click it and say show camera. And that will give you my camera path through things. And if I decide, oh, this camera up here, I've got them here and here and here, it's too close to the wall. I need to move that. If we go to edit walkthrough, you can see my camera is here at the first keyframe. I can now move it to the next keyframe, the next keyframe, and then the next keyframe, and then I can do a couple of things there. First, I'll go just with moving it towards the center of the corridor. I have 2 controls up here, or a control called active camera or path. An active camera lets me re-aim the camera from that point, but path will let me simply move this camera, this keyframe, to another location. I strongly urge on you, either in this or in Keith's project, if you're doing any of this, is to have as few points as far apart as you can, because if you start doing lots of little camera points, the camera is going to be sort of trying to navigate through those, almost like a skier on a slalom course, and the camera just keeps going back and forth. So as few as you can, pretty far apart. Okay, now let's say I wanted partway down there to look up at the icicles on the ceiling, whatever happens to be up there. I'm going to go back to the walkthrough. the walkthrough itself, not just the camera path and plan. Edit the walkthrough. I'm going to go next key. I'm going to step back to the. I'm going to. Here's the first keyframe. I'm going to go down 2 more, somewhere in the middle of the hallway, and here I'm going to look up at the lights on the ceiling. So in the keyframe view, not in the others. The others are just Revit just fills them in between keyframes. Grab here. I want to look up, not move up, but look up, like that. So whatever's on the ceiling, I will see it. So I'm walking down. It'll slowly start looking up, not moving up, just looking up, and then look back down again by the time we get to the next, all the way back down by the time we get to the next one. So let's see what that will do. Back up to the beginning. I'm just going to play it. So we're walking down the hall. Getting to where the camera starts aiming up now. Okay, so there I am looking up there halfway down the hall, and then it starts looking back down again by the time I get to those last 2 keyframes. And I also could have looked sideways. I could have done whatever I want from each of those. The temptation is to do a bunch of that, and it gets really whiplashy and sort of sick making. From that keyframe view, I could have looked up and sideways. Previewing play in any of these animations will go a lot faster in hidden line mode instead of realistic. So if we just wanted to edit walkthrough, play, there we are looking up. Much easier to preview. So let's say you're walking down the hall and you really wanted to look at whatever was on that wall, even as you kept moving. So that's frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, which is the one I had looking up. If I take wheel here, I'm going to look back down again, but instead of looking up, I'm just going to look to the side to look at this artwork on the wall. I can't, if I zoom, I'm going to zoom for the whole video. We can't zoom in, we can't zoom within the whole thing, so I'm going to ignore that. So if I previous keyframe, and then play it, I'll go down here, look at those guys on the way past, and then swing back. You can even actually look back over your shoulder if you want. While we're doing that, let me show you how that looks like. Walk through. Next keyframe, which is even farther down the hall. I'm looking back down the hall. This is going to really hurt when we play it. But let's take a look at this guy. Down the hall, bend to look at him, look back behind me, swing back around and finish up with the niche again. So those options are there. As a rule, the less acrobatic those movements are, the easier it is for people to understand what's going on. If you look on top of page 4, I talk about deceleration. You can slow down for part of an animation. That's sometimes helpful as you're going around corners, where instead of things swinging by really fast, you can slow down and then pick your speed up once you're going fast again. I have here a thing about flying around outside the model instead of walking through it. You can see how that works. With rendering and animation taking so long, I have here at the bottom of page 4 the sort of best approximation of a rendered view without actually having to render each frame. And we'll pick it and we'll go to the realistic visual style, the graphic display options. We'll uncheck show edges, smooth lines with anti-aliasing. I'm going to turn shadows. I'm going to turn, well, we don't, cast shadows are ones from the sun, but I will show ambient shadows, which are these sort of darkening things here. The lighting and background options are really more for exterior animations than for interiors. I think that's probably a pretty good way to look at this. Be sure to pick the correct lighting scheme, in this case, artificial only. And what I want to show you here is a couple ones done like 2 years ago, I guess. In Molly's studio, we had there was a big building down on Main or Market that was being turned into a hotel or something or other. And this was one of the downstairs sort of lobby cafe areas. So you can tell what's going on. No sunlight and stuff here. Oh, because it's not a rendered view, it's a realistic view. And then here was another. And this had, textures turned on, but still no actual lighting going on. So these are just sort of with the default settings, 20 seconds at 15 frames per second. And then with the same model, or with her version of the same model, Faye Singletary did this with Enscape, basically because she had been unhappy with the look of this and think, what do I have to do here? So she did this guy. It didn't take much longer to generate this than it takes to watch it. And this is what, another couple $100 worth of computer hardware. And I think students can subscribe to the software for like $100 a year or something. That's probably not that awful useful. But watch happens here. All those reflections, it's pretty extraordinary. Move into this space, some default clouds or something or other out there, and then the exposure automatically adjusts to this inside. And then let's just watch that again just for fun. And she hasn't really finished modeling it yet. She carved these holes in the floor too soon. She hollowed out the building to turn it into a hotel. That's what it boiled down to. But it's smooth, it's lit, it's textural. So the three programs that do this kind of work. The first was Lumion, which is still cool. Twinmotion, that I think I have installed here, we'll see. And Enscape, which I had here, but I've let my subscription lapse. And I don't think they restored it yet. And then one downstairs to the first floor of the Mace building that I did quickly just to see what that looked like with the sunshine and stuff. So it's a whole nother world in terms of rendering quality. And the nice thing about these is that each works as a simultaneous add-in to Revit. So basically your screen just splits and has the same view in both things. And if you move something in Enscape, it moves in Revit. Move it in Revit, it moves in Enscape. And it comes with its own materials if you want them, and lots of people and things that Enscape can render. AutoCAD just thinks they're gray stuff. It doesn't know what to do with them. All of them allow you to navigate live through the space, sort of a guided tour. You can just go to a view in, let me get back to the Revit view. Something you can do in Revit is just with the walk tool is just slowly with your mouse move through, and the camera just follows your mouse along. And the farther forward you go, the faster you go. The farther back you go, the slower, and you keep going backwards. You can see what my mouse is doing. It's just doing that. You can be doing this in Enscape as well, just sort of navigating or taking a client or a presentation through the space, either with cursor keys. Do cursor keys work here? No, just the mouse. And getting used to the walk tool is a little, takes a little bit of work. But you can, go through doors, and see the bathroom or whatever all that stuff out there was. Go back through and go into the hall. Anyway, and this, so in Enscape, you're doing all this live with light and shade and shadow and stuff. So here's twin motion. Oh, I have that at home, not even here anymore. And I think we'll look at those a little more next on Tuesday when I practice a little bit and get them installed. One or more of them installed over here. Oh, and the reason what made me think about it was those do come with walking people, and you just give them a path, and they walk along it. Or you can say put a lot of people on there, and then they just come every couple of seconds, random, tall, short, whatever people coming along, cars, that kind of stuff. The way you tell if you've got the graphics hardware necessary to run these programs, if you go into, I'll show you control panel, system. And here you can see that this computer has a dedicated graphics card that does all this fancy stuff separate from the main processor itself. You can visit the Enscape3D.com website to check the compatibility of your graphics card if you have one. Some laptop models can render still images and generate animations fine, but perhaps not be able to provide smooth, real-time, interactive visualization. Computers with such a graphics card will usually have a sticker to that effect next to the keyboard saying NVIDIA or Radeon and then the model number. Well, I think that's what I got for today.